Hi, this is Farrell Sam. Welcome to this episode of the Living and Working Abroad show. Um, with the index for today is to look and continue on our theme for tax creep. But first of all, we're going to look at some changes coming up in EU regulation for expats living and working abroad. The changes and the turmoil of World War III going on around the world, and how minority reports and opinions can reflect in the changes that are happening. As we've seen in the tax and spending review in the UK recently, how can expats plan for lower taxes living and working abroad? So let's get started. Just a reminder to all UK expats living and working abroad in the EU. The EU is a regulatory body. It's not a sovereign government, but it's got this semi-sovereign existence like the UN or the World Health Organization. It's not quite a law unto itself, but it makes rules and regulations which countries throughout the EU have to obey, and that can include EU countries which have got dependent places like the Azores or some places off the South American coast, or islands within France or Spain or Portugal. There's not many left in England because they've been given away, but putting that to one side, the EU regulation it covers all those areas in the EU and Iceland and Greenland as well. For travel into those countries from next year, the EU are introducing what they call the ETIAS. Now, this has been something that's been years in the making, and it's electronic authority to travel. It's not a visa, it's not a passport. But what's the difference between a visa and a passport? A visa is an authority to travel for a short fixed period of time. A passport is something that allows you to travel and proves your identity as a citizen of a country. A travel authority allows you to go to these countries for a short period of time, but it's something that you have to get before you travel. It's exactly the same as a passport. It's the same job, except that it vets and verifies and tells the government who you are, where you are, and what you're doing, and when it is. And the EU postponed it a few times, but again, it's due to come in 2026. If you've got a business or family or home in the EU, then you're going to need these travel visas every time you nip over to France, Portugal, Spain, Greece, Cyprus, or any other European country for a short trip or holiday. So what's the ways around that? What can you do to protect yourself? If you've got a holiday home in Cyprus, Malta, Greece, Spain or Portugal or France, then you could get yourself a longer term resident permit. Now that may only be for a year, but it means that you don't need to get the ETIAS each time. If you've got a residency permit, especially if you can date it back to pre-EU, then that residency permit allows you to come and go without having to have the ETIAS. So if you're living and working abroad, or you own a property in the EU, consider getting a residency permit now so you can freely travel as often as you want and not be subject to the Schengen 90 days in 180 rules and regulations that the EU will be able to apply with their ETIAS scheme from 2026. There's lots of turmoil going on in the world, and as we've commented in the past, World War III is well underway. For me, it definitely started when Israel was invaded in October 23, and 1,300 people were killed by the Hamas people. All Hamas are openly sponsored by Iran, who sponsor terrorist type organizations in Lebanon, Gaza, Yemen, and many other states. And this has been brought home to roost ever since Donald Trump was elected, not since he came into power, since he was elected, things have been changing in the Middle East. We've seen that uh, uh, Lebanon has settled down. The Houthi rebels have been continually bombed by the Americans and brought to heel. And meanwhile, also, we've seen Syria settled and a despot, autocratic dictator run away to Russia. Um, we've also seen Qatari expel Hamas leaders. So although Hamas was in Palestine, the Gaza Strip, their political leaders chose to live in Qatar. You can't imagine why that is. Qatar expelled those earlier this year, which was quite unusual, but shows that the majority of the Middle East countries, like Saudi Arabia and UAE, they've made a settlement with Israel. They've accepted that Israel can have an existence and made their peace. Whereas Iran, since 1979, have been propagating the destruction of Israel, which is why they're trying to stop them having the bombs the nuclear bomb to be able to bomb Israel out of existence. This is a commitment of that government. And finally, somebody has stood up to them from a political perspective and taken that out of them. The Russians, the Iranians ran to the Russians. The Iranians have been filling the Russians full of missiles to bomb Iraq, bomb Ukraine. But the Russians have told Iran to do a peace deal, and now we have a ceasefire a week later. So that's interesting. Be very clear. Most of the Middle East countries like Egypt, Saudi, UAE have made a settlement with Israel to get a peaceful coexistence going forward. But World War III would persist and maybe will start to stop if Iran stops. Consider what the Saudi Arabians are doing at the moment. Their public investment fund is sponsoring the World Club football in the USA at the moment. They're the major sponsor of the World Cup next year. And as we speak, in summer of 2025, the Saudi Arabian football team is competing in the CONCACAF Cup in North America, along with Mexico, USA and Canada, being held in USA and Canada. So Saudi is very invested in North America at the moment. They're even donated the funds for the American online streaming company called DAZN. You've heard of them, the international online broadcasting thing. They've got the worldwide exclusive rights to the Club World Football. You may have missed that, but they bought that. They're not a profitable company. They bought it entirely with funds from the Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, and the European countries are very invested in supporting a new way forward to get peace in the world and end World War III. The question is, whose side are you on? We saw a Minority Report in the UK recently where the UK Attorney General questioned the right of Israel to use defensive force. This is all comes down to international law and UN charters like Article 51, where you've got a right to self-defense. You've got a right to political freedoms. And this, unfortunately, is what's going on in Israel at the moment. Strange that the British government chose to say that they agree that the Israelis could use defensive force to shoot down missiles heading for Tel Aviv, but it was unlawful under international law for them to use defensive force to destroy those missile batteries that are sending the missiles to Iran in the first place. So it's okay for them to be shot at, but not them to take out the guns that are doing the shooting, even though they might be thousands of miles away. This was the decision, this is the position of the British government, which has isolated itself compared to many other countries around the world. Which side do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the side of the Middle East countries and America supporting Israel and against terrorism or not? A Minority Report from the UK which undermines what the UK government are doing. Which moves us into our main topic, looking at the tax creep that's occurring for UK expats living and working abroad. We saw last week in the spending review lots of additional spending announcements. There was no tax increases in that spring budget spending review. So we've had a budget where there was no tax increases in the spring. That we've got an agreement where there's a spending review where there's an additional spending. Now the additional spending that they put into their plans in the spending review in the summer of 25 is not funded in the last budget, which put up an extra 40 billion taxes. So where are they going to go next? Well, one of the things that they announced was they're going to employ 8,000 new staff working for HMRC. At PROAC, we firmly believe that you always tell the right information, you get your tax returns done on time. This is very, very important. What's also an easy target is for the UK government to look at corporations and to rich expats and see where they can get some additional tax. Corporation tax is 25% in the UK. How can they get more 25% tax in? Well, that's looking at ways of changing the nature and the definition of tax so that the international companies can pay more tax on their worldwide earnings. Tax is about fairness. It's not about taking out easy targets. If the British want to target international businesses and expats, they will continue to leave the UK. And the UK, with London at its centre, will continue to flounder in terms of what it's trying to do. We've got a government that very much, it keeps changing its tune. It keeps turning over one way then the other. And the budget that we got last year, they blamed everybody else for putting up the tax increases. But now they've announced their own taxes and they're coming home to roost. So expats, you need to consider what you're going to do. If you've got a fixed income that's arising in the UK, then it will be taxed in the UK. Now pensions, you can move out of the UK at the moment and have them taxed in another jurisdiction. It could be in the future that the government decide to change that. So if you do have a pension, you could consider moving that now. If you become an expat living and working abroad in Cyprus and you're over 25, you could draw your whole pension fund and pay only 5% tax. But you can't do that if they change the law and don't allow you to move that pension fund in the future. We don't know if that was going to happen in the autumn budget. What we have seen is some other issues that are coming along. We've seen this migration of wealthy people to other countries around the world. You've got Cyprus, the Middle East, Dubai and Italy, which are all low tax jurisdictions for expats living and working abroad. Portugal used to be very good. Anyone in Portugal on the habitual non-resident scheme can still enjoy worldwide income at low taxes. But what the Portuguese have done is introduce a solidarity tax where everybody has to pay at least 2%. And if you get a nomad visa in somewhere like Spain, you're going to pay 24% tax. In a country like Cyprus, you can be an individual tax resident paying 0% tax on dividends, or 5% tax on pensions, or 12.5% tax on corporation tax. The difference with someone like Cyprus and the rest of the world is the Cyprus pride themselves on not changing their taxes from year to year. Whereas in the UK, we're living with the uncertainty of where the taxes are going to come from next. If you have got overseas property or you've got overseas business, then now is the time to make your move, make your decision to protect that capital or income from abroad from UK taxes. For example, if you've got property rental abroad and you hold that property rental inside a family trust, A family trust can receive the income and it's not taxed by you unless the British change the law. You know that your pension fund is going to be taxed for inheritance tax from next year. So if you withdraw that and pay 5% now, your family don't pay 40% when you die. That pension fund will only add, it'll only add to your likelihood of an increasing inheritance tax take in the year ahead. And the government will use that projected rise in tax revenue in future years to keep spending and taxing in the UK. We've seen also that the UK are trying to manage immigration into the UK and create a new set of rules for people coming to the UK. Some of this is slightly irrelevant as long as they adhere to international asylum rules, which don't apply if you're criminally paying somebody to import you into the UK. However, the rules that the UK are considering for special immigration visas with skilled workers that can earn over 56,000 a year, with English law requirements, or innovator fund rules, or graduate visas. All these things are common around the world and they're common throughout Europe. So it's bringing the UK into a similar sort of a regime as the EU, but also it brings the existing UK population into the same circle of requirements and monitoring and regulation. So the thing to do is to manage your income and your capital to protect yourself against inheritance tax at 40%, income tax up to 45%, dividend taxes up to 39%. How can you do that? How can you save that tax and protect those fixed incomes around the world? A UK expat that goes to live and work abroad can register their pension currently in another country and pay tax in that country, which may be 0, 5% or 10%, but certainly lower than the maximum 45% in the UK. You can pay 5% and clear your pension fund and then hold your property, investment and business assets in an overseas trust that will protect you from tax. This is what the big multinationals do at the moment, which are the subject of the tax creep for the government, but individuals can do that as well. The tax creep does extend to inheritance tax and to businesses. In the UK, corporation tax is 25%. In Cyprus, corporation tax is 12.5%. So a Cyprus holding company in an international trust for your business could pay 12.5% corporation tax and reduce the amount of corporation tax you're paying in the UK. There's lots of ways that PROACT can help people living and working abroad. The tax creep in the UK by a government with an autocratic majority is likely to increase. They've told you that they're going to increase spending, so the tax take is going to increase. It's going to increase by stealth on your pension fund, adding to your inheritance tax bill, and your capital gains tax, which has already increased from 10 to 18 and 24% this year. So for more help and guidance on living and working abroad, protecting rental property overseas, and to having a holding company in a family or business or property trust, you can contact us at proactpartnership.com. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you again next time.